All right, back to readings from The Sovereign Child, no edits, all authenticity. Um, Finished up the first chapter, the chapter on food, and so now moving on to chapter 2, which is sleep, and just going to dive right in. My wife thought maybe I should start with this chapter, so it's fun, all the different thoughts of which chapters to start with. But the argument for sovereignty around sleep to her felt more fundamental, or perhaps as fundamental, but simpler. Food is, confused with all this crazy ideas about nutrition. Sleep has obviously a lot of ideas about what's a healthy amount of sleep, but it's pretty compressed set of ideas compared to all of the different types of food. But avoiding that, jumping in, chapter 2, sleeping when they want. The argument against controlling sleep is the same as that of food, although, albeit quite a bit simpler. Yeah, so it's the same argument. The same argument comes up again and again, and so I'll just let it go. Sleeping, like eating, is deeply and irreducibly personal. Just as it is impossible to know what another person's tastes and cravings are, it is impossible to know how tired a person is and how that compares with other preferences they have at any given moment. Like eating, sleeping needs to be figured out, and kids need to become attuned to the signals coming from their bodies so that they can make the appropriate trade-offs between staying awake and getting rest. All right, so I love this analogy. It's not an analogy, it's an example. Imagine a good friend is visiting from out of town. You are tempted to stay up late and spend time with him, but you also have a project due tomorrow morning at work. Or imagine you have started a movie and it is so gripping that you consider staying up later than you'd planned on to finish it. Or maybe you're trying to add exercise to your daily routine, but the only time to fit it in is at dawn. The idea that there is a simple rule to follow across all of these problem situations is nonsense. In each case, the correct choice depends on a broad consideration of priorities, preferences, and the unique workings of one's individual body. It is common to both regret staying up late and to feel selfish for going to bed early. The best we can hope for is to learn from our mistakes and refine our choices moving forward. I'll just keep reading here. In fact, it is those very experiences that often teach us about the value of certain friends, the quality of particular movies, and the utility of exercise. Walking around bleary-eyed at work can feel almost satisfying when it is caused by spending time with a great friend. Or, if the late-night hangout session was a bore, if your friend was uncaring about overstaying their welcome, then the sense of fatigue the next day might spark frustration and cause you to reevaluate your friendship. If you're often staying up and finding yourself miserably tired at work, maybe that's because you hate your job. If you find yourself excitedly jumping out of bed to exercise, maybe your late-night activities are worth dropping. Navigating these trade-offs through trial and error is how we figure out our preferences and arrange our priorities, a process otherwise known as living our lives. Simple rules like get 8 hours of sleep a night tell us nothing about the relevant trade-offs, and they actually block our ability to rethink and fine-tune our preferences. So really, again, the argument is about it's about preferences, it's about establishing your preferences, it's about understanding, building them yourself, having control over that process of building them, and navigating the world in which the preferences collide with each other. It's almost like, the obvious message of this book, the message that should be obvious to anyone, is that preferences collide. And it's not, how to deal with that is not about eliminating the quote-unquote bad preferences, but instead figuring out how you can manage them so you get the most out of your day. So just like no one can tell you what the best way to eat is, no one can tell you if you should stay up late to hang out with a friend who's coming to visit, or should you say, hey, great to see you, thanks for coming, I have a big day at work tomorrow though, so I gotta go to sleep early, right? What do you do in that situation? There's no ability to provide a framework. There's no ability to provide a rule. There is only the understanding of how good a friend is this. Is this really a good friend, or is this someone who's using you for, as a crash pad? And then they're pretending to be, such a good old friend who's worth, spending time with, and who it's okay that they're inconveniencing you because you're such good buddies, right? But really they're taking advantage of you. I mean, I've had this happen. They're taking advantage of you, and rather than call it what it is, they're saying, it would be such a great opportunity to catch up. How do you figure that out, right? You've got to figure that out. No, somebody else can't tell you, without them engaging with this person. So then I listed a bunch of different trade-offs. Or you start a movie. If it's a really good movie, you stay up late. And then the fatigue in the morning is often, again, can be even satisfying. Like, wow, I stayed up late doing something that was so cool. I'm so tired today, and it's okay. I'm a little proud of myself. I remember people in college being kind of, proud of how hungover they are because they had such a great night out, right? So the discomfort the next morning can actually be itself a signal of being satisfied with making a good decision the night before. Or of course it could also be a signal that, boy, the night before wasn't worth it. That was a mistake. I really shouldn't have done that. Next time I'm not going to do that, right? Next time I'm moving the priority of staying up late with a friend or going out or doing whatever, I'm moving that down because of how miserable I felt the next day. But you need to navigate that space to figure that stuff out. And if somebody navigates it for you, then you don't figure that out. And you're denied the opportunity to make the mistakes, right? Not only that, you're denied the opportunity to make the correct move. You're denied the opportunity of staying up and watching a good movie and having that satisfying aesthetic experience of, watching a good movie. So if somebody tries to control it, they prevent you from building the knowledge of your own preferences. And then, of course, it's also the rest of the foul four. They're a gatekeeper. They're somebody to be avoided, right? You sneak, you watch a movie in secret, right? You watch something on your phone in secret at night so your mom and dad don't know that you're doing it. You stay up late anyway, right? Now it's a battle. Now your priorities aren't about them. It's not about the priorities themselves. It's about dealing with mom and dad, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the other overlap here with the food situation is that if you control a kid's access to food, you block their ability to make mistakes like overeating. You block their ability to feel what that feels like, and notice, like, ugh, if I eat 2 bowls of ice cream, I'm kind of miserable afterwards. So the same thing with sleep. You don't want to block kids' access to the consequences of their own mistakes. All right. And I really like this line. I'm going to read it again. Navigating these trade-offs through trial and error is how we figure out our preferences and arrange our priorities, a process otherwise known as living our lives. That's what sovereign child means. Let them live their life so they can figure this stuff out. All right, these considerations are even more important for children who, unlike adults, are in the process of discovering the very idea that they are the owners and the stewards of their preferences and priorities. Autonomy is much more than the pleasure and pain of making good decisions. It is being the architect of your own life. Staying up late watching movies is only a problem in terms of what the kid wants to do in the morning. And the kid needs to be able to figure all of the relevant trade-offs themselves. Like eating, fatigue and sleep are some of the most elemental features of life, as they touch on almost every experience one has in the course of a day. As such, it is crucial that a child have a direct relationship with them, unmediated by others, and hence free from the distortions and confusions of considering what other people think. A kid can only come to truly understand how rest and fatigue impact everything else in the context of the freedom to try them out. Um, there you go. That's the whole argument. These fundamental things touch on everything else in life. So whatever your plans are for, if you're going on vacation, you have to make a plan for sleep. And how sleep works out is going to impact everything else that happens on vacation. If you're super tired, then that's going to impact all the experiences that also happen. So sleep impacts everything during the day. So if you're controlling sleep, you're controlling a kid's entire day. Now that could be an argument to say, well, it's so important, sleep is so important that I got to make sure it works well so that you're awake and you don't, do poorly in school, or if you're not irritable and unpleasant for your friends and you get emotionally shunned and socially shunned, etc. Right? On one hand, it's an understandable argument that sleep is so fundamental. It needs to be controlled so that it works well. But the problem is that sleep will conflict. So it will bump up against all the other priorities that a person has. And you don't know what those priorities are. Even for a kid, you don't know what those preferences are. They're forming those preferences, and so you need to allow them to figure out how sleep fits in the whole picture. I think that's just a huge amount of learning, right? You think about all the learning that goes on in school, supposedly. How about all the learning that goes on with matching food and sleep with the other interests in your life? That's enormous, right? That's a course of study for a decade, right? From birth to age 10, to figure those things out. That will be enough. If you figured out how to match sleep and eating with other things that you like in life, you're off to a great start. Reading and math are like icing on the cake compared to figuring that stuff out. All right. School, schedules, and sleep. The most common objection to letting kids manage sleep on their own is concern about waking up for school or daycare. The argument is that kids aren't capable of taking these morning obligations into consideration, and so the parents need to do so on their behalf, so that the kids aren't so miserable and exhausted during the day that their mood and performance suffer. The short answer, my short answer, is that sleep is an excellent reason not to force a kid to go to school or daycare in the first place. That's what I would say. If you assume that school is an absolute must, or daycare, right? I'm going to go off to work in the morning. You have to go to school. If that is non-negotiable, well, then sleep becomes a problem, right? Which is a problem of non-negotiable rules, right? If you force a certain thing, you create all these downstream problems that you also have to deal with. If you get rid of this one forced element, might not be easy, but if you can get rid of it, suddenly sleep becomes not a problem. If sleep's not a problem, then the going to bed routine, the brushing the teeth, right? Are you staying up watching your iPad? All of a sudden, that's not a problem. Like once you take away this have to wake up and go to school at a certain time problem, the number of upstream problems that get eliminated are extraordinary. And I think just the sheer number of them alone makes unschooling worth it. Unschooling is worth it for the stress-free evenings and nights. I would say that's enough, start to finish. In our home, there's no stress at night, and it is. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. The wealth, the well-being, right? It compensates for how much loss of well-being from eating ice cream and Oreos, let's say. I think it's compensated for easily by the boost to well-being that comes from anxiety-free evenings and sleep. All right. Sleep is an excellent reason not to force a kid to go to school or daycare in the first place. Yeah, that's not easy, all right? I'll address it later on in the book. So what do you do as an alternative? If you've got a job or you've got to leave for the day, it costs money to hire somebody to watch your kid, etc. But that's a separate question. And like I said, all problems are solvable, including those. All right, getting enough sleep has as much to do with waking up as it does with going to bed. Lots of energy is directed at the circumstances around going to bed, but the necessity of waking up early tends to be taken for granted. It should not be. Consider how different the life of a child is when they can sleep in every day. When there is no anxiety around going to bed, kids can enjoy themselves in the evening and continue engaging with whatever has captivated their interest. That's a huge one. See, like, when you're into something, there's almost nothing more important than simply having the time to keep working at it. It's not really work, right? Keep playing with it, whatever you want to call it. You want to keep at it. You want to explore it. You want to deepen it. You want, as much as you want to find out how much richness there is here, find out how much value there is here, and then you find out whether it's worth compromising on something else in order to spend more time with this thing. So you need the freedom to dig in, which means you need the time to dig in. And school not only fractures the day, which I'll get to, but it certainly fractures the evenings. Like, my kids can stay up as late as they want doing whatever they're interested in because they don't obviously have to go to bed in time to wake up. You get the idea. Parents, too, don't feel pressure to get their kids ready for bed. The sequence of bathing, teeth brushing, and pajama dressing is no longer a forced march that inevitably pits the resolve of the parents against their kids' desire to stay up and have fun. Yeah, it's like, I'm going to force you through this nighttime routine. I'm going to make you do it. It is like a forced march. Like, gonna get you into the bath, gonna get you washed, gonna get your hair combed, gonna get you to brush your teeth. I'm just like on top of you, like, it goes before that. I gotta finish dinner, eat enough broccoli and vegetables, then get upstairs, then, get ready, then get in bed, prevent the iPad from coming anywhere near them. How miserable. Waking up for school sets in motion a schedule for the entire day and for the whole family. Parents need to pick kids up after school, or arrangements must be made for after-school activities. These need to transition into dinner, which needs to be on the table in time for homework, which in turn needs to get finished before bedtime preparations. The entire day is on the clock, which suffuses it with tension that degrades everyone's ability to enjoy the moment or engage in a curiosity. A kid has no ability to sink their teeth into anything that requires more than an hour or so of attention, and priorities can't be rearranged because they are all shackled to the schedule, right? Especially for a whole family, right? You have to go to whatever practice, and then I got to pick you up because Timmy is finishing up whatever practice, and then mom made dinner for us, and then we've got this and we've got that, right? You have all these obligations, and so all the little chunks, first of all, the day is broken up into chunks, right? And the chunks can't really extend because at the end of one chunk is the beginning of another chunk, and then, if something new comes along, well, we really don't have time to explore and play around with that because we have our, our schedule, and we have our obligations to all these other people. And, even though the kid didn't pick any of this stuff, or maybe they did pick it, but they didn't understand that they were locked into it, it's a forced march. It sounds miserable. And then I, as a parent, better get dinner ready in time because, I can't be justifying my kid is forced to eat whatever if I don't even make it in time. So it's just so much pressure. It's making it hard for me to breathe. And then this really bugs me. A kid has no ability to sink their teeth into anything that requires more than an hour or so of attention. You get the hour chunk, and then it's on to the next thing. And so really, spending 2, 3, 4 hours, right? My favorite things. There's nothing like having unlimited time to just follow something as deep as it goes. That's how you develop a passion. You don't develop a passion by saying, okay, that was fun, we'll come back and do it tomorrow, this time tomorrow. Maybe it'll be raining tomorrow and you're going to miss tomorrow, so you have to wait till 2 days from now. Or maybe, we don't do this tomorrow. Maybe it doesn't come back till next week, etc. Or maybe there's a totally new thing that showed up that we didn't anticipate, and it would be great to explore this further. We can't do it. The beauty of a weekend is not just the luxury of sleeping in. It is the freedom to stay up and watch an epic movie, play a video game until your fingers ache, or horse around with siblings until everyone is bone tired. And that freedom suffuses the whole weekend. Even if you don't do those great things, just knowing that you have the freedom to do those things, that alone is often makes for satisfying, enjoyable time. Just having the freedom not to worry about the next thing and know that your possibilities are open is, in and itself, I think, an antidote to anxiety and depression and blah blah blah. So the freedom suffuses a whole weekend of knowing you can stay up late. This is, and then Sunday. Sundays are so miserable because you know that Sunday night, Sunday is actually going to end. The freedom of Sunday is going to end around 5 o'clock, right? Because then you have to have dinner, and then you have to do your homework and prep for the next day and go to bed early and blah 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 and all the fun stuff, right? So the freedom starts Friday at 5 o'clock, and you get all Friday afternoon or Friday at 3 o'clock or whenever school or work is done. But then it ends Sunday at 5 o'clock. So all of Sunday kind of sucks, because when you wake up Sunday morning, you're like, whatever I'm doing today is going to run against the ceiling of 5 o'clock, and it can't, spill over into tomorrow. Sundays kind of suck. And Fridays are fun even when you wake up in the morning, even when you're going to work or school. Friday is suffused with a lightness, an openness. I bet people like Fridays more than Sundays. Maybe not, but you get the idea. This is what childhood is for: the freedom to explore the world, discover and pursue passions, and generally waste time playing and daydreaming. Why would we want to limit that to just the weekend? Oh my God, right? Why is childhood only for the weekends? This is crazy. This is the magical time. All day, every day should be like the weekend. On the other hand, the school-induced schedule creates an environment of anxiety and stress. Parents become taskmasters, and all the activities of a child's life are seen as temporary steps in a sequence that, if not maintained, might collapse at any moment into chaos, right? You need the schedule. You need to justify the schedule. You need to surround the schedule with all these kind of moralizations. These are your obligations, right? Everybody has obligations, and these are yours. You kids, you have to do this and you have to do that. That's why people say that school is your job. It is absolutely nothing like a job. You don't get paid for going to school. You have minimal control over yourself compared to a job, right? If a job had anything like the restrictions that a kid has in school, you'd quit in a heartbeat. Not to mention you don't get paid. And the idea that you're getting paid in your future earnings based on the training that you get in school is complete nonsense, because your future earnings have almost nothing to do with the training in school, certainly 5th grade. All right. But I think the fear that comes with this is that people are looking at the collapse of their schedule and the collapse of having a plan for the day and the collapse of you being the, I don't say tyrant or dictator, you being the authority who moves you through the day. If you don't have the schedule, then you're not really the authority. Now, you have this anxiety, this uncertainty about what are we going to do today. I'm not saying that that's all not real. It's definitely real. But my argument is that these things should be filled up with people's interests, and a parent's job is to figure out how to supply a safe place, supervised experience for a kid through a day that is not school, but is not neglect, right? They still need a plan, they still need someone to take care of them, but they don't need school. Everyday tasks cannot be pursued for their own sake, but rather must be tailored to the all-encompassing schedule. Oh my God, right? I mean, you could go on and on about this. You're taught, I had a tweet about this, a post on X the other day, that school teaches you to be a phony. School teaches you to, everything you do is for the approval of adults and teachers. It's all for the approval of somebody else. You're doing after-school soccer, not because you love soccer. Maybe you do, and that's wonderful. But if you don't, A lot of kids are doing after-school soccer because they need something to fit in that after-school period while mom and dad are still at work. And so that's what soccer is for. So soccer is for the dictates of the schedule, the dictates of the schedule, the dictates of the schedule. It's not for soccer in and of itself. And kids typically, I think almost most of the things that a kid does during their day, right? Science isn't about learning science. Science is about passing science class, doing well on a test, making the science teacher happy. Same thing with social studies and math and everything else. It's not for using math to figure out something that's a genuine problem in your life. Math is for, moving forward, moving up the ladder of academic achievement. That's the case with most things in a scheduled childhood. Kids can't eat food for pleasure or novelty, but instead to have energy for the next activity. They can't try on clothes and new hygiene choices solely to look and feel good, but instead to appear presentable at whatever is next on the schedule. Screens aren't about their content, but instead about distracting from the scheduled activity, making them a harmful temptation rather than a beneficial window into the world or onto the world, right? So all of the things become, the first question through the parent's mind is, how is this going to fit in with the schedule, right? Is ice cream going to fit in? Well, we're having dinner later on, so you can't have ice cream now because we're going to have dinner. You can't stay up late because you have school tomorrow. You can't, dress this way, or when I say, oh yeah, and the iPad, oh my God, right? That's just a disaster. That's gonna screw all this up. So you can't have unfettered access to the iPad because it conflicts, it distracts, it crowds out, right? It does all these things. Why can't the iPad just be about, adults interact with iPads in terms of, do they like what they're seeing on there? Do they like managing their photos and browsing the web or listening to music or whatever it is, right? So adults get to live their lives authentically, where the things that they engage in over the course of a day, they do so based on their interest in that thing itself. At least they have the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, many adults sacrifice much of their day doing things for a secondary purpose, right? I'm doing this to make money. I hate my job, but I do it to make money so that then I can do these other things. Whereas ideally, your way that you make money would be through something that you love. So in order to have that experience as an adult, to be somebody who earns a living by doing what they love, you got to really know what you love. You need the time to cultivate passions, and when is the best time to do that? During childhood, before you have responsibilities, before you have kids, before you have rent payments. When you're a kid, that is the best time to discover things that you love, to deepen them, to have unlimited time or as much time as possible, to have resources available, to have people to ask questions to have the internet to ask questions to have YouTube videos, to explore and develop these things and be so goddamn good at them that there is a niche market out there where people will pay you to do more of this. That's the goal, at least I would say. But if that's rarity in your life, and as a kid you learn instead that things are done for others and not for your own enjoyment of them, then you kneecap that ability. Humorously, school is about college, and college is about getting a job and sustaining a life. And only then, in your 20s, can food and bathing and clothes and entertainment be about those things in themselves. Shouldn't childhood be the time when kids are free to explore those things that are integral to life, to learn about and develop relationships with them for their own sake? The magic of childhood is that kids don't have dependence or even a responsibility to ensure their own survival. So it is precisely during this time that a person is most free to engage with the world directly. There you have it. So direct engagement with the world, that really is a big theme of this, and that if someone else is controlling your engagement with the world, then it's disrupting all of these developments and discoveries and the rest of it. All right, I'm going to stop there. That's the beginning of the sleep chapter, and I'll pick up on putting toddlers on a schedule next time. All right, fun conversation. And the book is available for free PDF online, thesovereignchild.com. Also, an audiobook read by me on Amazon and the paperback as well. And thanks for listening.